Hi everyone, this is Bian Li, founder of the Hungry Lab, and I'm excited today because I have my wonderful friend Angelita Moraga here to talk about some very exciting things that she's working on that also flows into what the Hungry Lab is working on. And Angelita's a dear friend of mine. We have known each other, we were just talking about this over lunch.
16 years
16 years, back in our Chicago days, right? We met salsa dancing, we found out we had a lot in common, and we've just been friends ever since.
Yep.
And
salsa.
Yeah, and Angelita is a very inspirational person. She is an entrepreneur, runs her own successful PR and marketing agency for the arts. She's worked with stars like Lin-Manuel Miranda, John Leguizamo, and other folks. And she's also a trained journalist. She was in journalism for many years. A great communicator, storyteller, and now she's combining all of these various skills and trainings to embark on a movement and a message on restorative justice and why that's so critical. So Angelita, welcome. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. As we were talking, it just sort of organically happened.
Right, and we were talking over lunch, and we were saying just wow, just like the alignment of all the issues and how there's a critical need for what Angelita is working on now. So Angelita, can you tell us a little bit more about what restorative justice is?
Okay, so restorative justice, in a way, it's looking at a philosophy. And this philosophy goes back to ancient times even. It's a way to look at our society, not in a punitive sense, where we punish people for those that have committed a crime or those that have violated certain laws. It's not punitive. What we're looking at is restoring relationships between people. So that's where the word restorative comes in.
And you're doing a lot in schools with young people on this,
That's
right?
how I started, was working within the Chicago public school system. And we had a partnership with the Youth and Family Service Agency that I worked with, where I've trained all throughout Chicago on how to put this type of program into place to give youth an idea of a different way that they would be interacting with the staff or the administration if there ever was a violation of one of the rules, so to speak. And so it was more based on the youth taking control of how their school was going to be run and using restorative justice as the means to do that philosophy. So again, it's more of a restorative sense of rebuilding the community instead of punishing a student for a violation that happened.
Reintegrating that student back into society that accepts them, so they're not ostracized even further and go down a more negative path.
And when it becomes part of who they are, when they realize for themselves what they have done and how they can repair the harm that they've caused, whether to their fellow student, the staff, or whoever it is, they're more able to be, in a way, they realize for themselves what harm they have caused and how they can repair that harm.
So they become more self-aware.
Very much more self-aware.
More integrated, more collaborative.
And what we found is that when we did peer juries and peer mediations, those students that created or first came to us and were sent to us from the school, once they completed their agreement, which we had, a lot of times they would ask to be part of the peer mediation or part of being a peer juror. And those students became some of our stellar students, some of our stellar peer jurors and peer mediators, because they were transformed. And because they were transformed, they were very effective in helping others transform and to reintegrate back into their school community.
And you saw that it also built skills, like confidence, empowerment, communication.
Yeah, definitely. I was the trainer for the school district for Chicago Public Schools. And we trained in empathy building, listening skills. We talked about what is your anger, or how are you affected by anger? How do you react to anger?
Because hurt people, and a lot of times it's the kids who are crying out for help.
Yes.
When they act out.
Yes. So yes, there's a story that I'll never forget. I was with two of the interns that were working with us in the office at one of the schools that we were in. And our door was always open for anyone that needed mediation or a jury. And one young lady, I think she was in the 11th grade, she somewhat stormed into the office, but it wasn't because she was angry. it was because she was, well, in a sense, she was trying to calm her anger. And she had us as a resource. She knew that she could come to us, and she told us, I need a mediation now. I'm gonna punch someone in the face if I don't have a mediation. What I found striking about that story is that she had somewhere to go.
Right.
We were there
Yep.
for her. And what was it that we were doing? We were actually preventing some violence, as well as giving her a place to process what was just happening to her. So that story always stuck with me because we were able to give her a place and to allow her to constructively work through her anger.
Right, and good for her to realize that she needed help and to seek out help.
Yes. We would go every semester to the schools and introduce what we were doing. We would let the students know when we had trainings if they wanted to be a peer juror. And it was very helpful because we were aware, we were there, and we were a presence on the campus. So the whole culture in that particular school was very much invested in what we were doing, which unfortunately in some schools was not the case. And it was a harder job for me to do and to get the word out and to get an understanding of what we were doing.
Right. The work sounds so important, and it aligns so much with what the Hungry Lab is trying to build in terms of a regenerative economy where everybody has a place and everybody can exercise and unleash their superpowers and their talents if we only gave them the opportunity to do so.
Yes.
And so many young people don't because they face so many barriers, even when it comes to the self and the awareness it takes for them to grow personally.
Yeah, she had the awareness, this particular young lady, she had the awareness, but because of restorative justice, she had the place to go as well.
Exactly, and the opportunity is so important.
Yeah, because she was very aware that she was angry, and she was aware that she was going to punch this girl in the face, but she was aware that she could come to a different conclusion
Right.
for herself and for the betterment of the whole school.
Right, and that alternative is so important. You mentioned that you face some difficulties in certain schools versus others. Can you tell us a little bit more about sometimes the difficulties and the challenges you face in trying to get a new way of doing things out there when we've accepted, the traditional method of punishing children versus what you're doing?
I think a big part of what I always faced, I was responsible for trying to build programs within the school district. So I was responsible for growing it. So a lot of it was introducing the subject, what is restorative justice? A lot of it was education to the school administration. And the comment that would always come back is, are we letting these kids off? Are we letting them do something with no consequences?
Yeah, or get away with something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in an ironic sort of sense, it's sort of the opposite because we keep them accountable, first to themselves, and then accountable for the people that they have harmed.
Right.
And so we're not letting kids off. We're actually making them better people so that they don't create this chaos in their lives and in the other lives that they face or they see on a day-to-day basis. So it's that's the biggest question, or the biggest pushback in a sense, is are we letting these kids off? Well, it wasn't done like that before. Why are we starting something like this now? So that's the number one question or pushback. And the other thing is, how do we get something like this started? It just takes up so much of my time, and I'm just trying to teach these kids.
Right. How do you train the trainers and teach the teachers?
Yeah. So to be able to see a value in what we're doing, and it's not taking away their time, but it's going to give them more time in the classroom because they're not going to be having to deal with disruptions or people or students that are trying to, there's things in their lives that are causing this disruption. So we're helping to create a better classroom environment as well.
And a safer space.
Safer space and safer classroom environment.
That's fantastic. And so what do you think were some of the skills that you've had to draw upon from your past lives, if you will, to be able to do this? And what do you think is critical for the young people listening out there in terms of the advice that you'd give for anybody trying to create a movement on an important message?
Oh, just in general,
Yeah.
a movement on an important message. Well, my background is in communications. I have a communications degree. My emphasis was journalism. And my training, the most effective or the crucial part of the training was knowing how to listen effectively. Because so much of communication is you're listening, but are you really?
Right.
You're trying to listen so that you can do a rebuttal.
Right.
Instead of really taking in what the person is saying. And as mediators and jurors, you really have to listen so you can see where the root cause is of the problem. So I would say from my background in listening skills, and to understand where does conflict come from. Because if we can understand it, and I'll never forget the person that trained me, she went out and told everyone in this room, think of your last argument that you've had with the person. And so think about it. She asked everyone, and she said, okay, now that you've thought about it, I am going to tell you that I know exactly why it happened. Doesn't matter what you're thinking, I know what happened in that situation. I can tell you. And everyone was very shocked that, well, how can you tell me what happened to my last argument with my best friend or whoever? And she said, it happened because of change. That was very appalling to me in a sense. She said, either something changed in your relationship and you didn't want it to, or you need something to change in that relationship and it hasn't changed yet.
Yeah.
And so that was something that I always take with me. That we need to change in a broader sense society.
Shift our mindset, yeah. And that takes a long time.
And there's something that we know is not right.
Right.
And something has to change. But I think that with a skill such as restorative justice, we have the opportunity to do it. And so that was sort of my takeaway, is listening and knowing where conflict comes from so that we can help to change it.
How does one teach empathy?
Oh, we have several activities that I do. One of the activities is we write down something that we consider bullying, where you write down your judgment of somebody. And you don't know what you have on your forehead, it's stuck right there. And that person treats you the way your label is.
Oh, wow.
And so that label becomes how they treat you, right? And so when you're on the receiving end of that, and you can, thankfully at the end of the session, you can take it off and you don't have to feel like that anymore. But that experience through interactive activities, I think, are very helpful because you live in that other person's life for a little bit. Some will say, I can't even think of some of the labels that we place on the students' heads, and they're treated in that way. Or, so that was through activities, I think. A lot of it's through activities.
Experiential learning.
Experiential, yes.
Do you think that, from a child's perspective, that labeling can hurt how we view ourselves growing up, because we feel like if we're labeled as such early on, that's who we have to be, and then we end up continuing to manifest that and repeat those patterns through our lives, when we can actually empower ourselves to break out of labels that no longer serve us?
Yeah, I think especially with young people, there's so much pressure to either conform, and especially now with social media. If you're labeled as such, and it amplifies that even more.
And they internalize it.
Exactly. And there's, in anecdotally, there's a lot more suicide, a lot of depression. So yes, those labels are very, very dangerous and detrimental. And so empathy is extremely important, because you can empathize with the label, and then you can show your fellow student that, no, that doesn't have to be you, because you have talents and skills that are not necessarily according to your label. There's something deeper than just what you can see on the outside.
Right, yeah. And I think that's such an important message that we all have to internalize, that we are
even as an
above our
adult.
labels. Exactly.
Because there are labels constantly at us, and hopefully as we grow older, we're able to filter that, but sometimes you're not, and it's harder, but we try with those skills.
Yeah. So it's good that we're getting them young in the schools.
Exactly. And I do enjoy working with young people. A lot of people ask me, well, how can you deal with kids? And I enjoy it because they're able to even teach me a lot of times. And they're open to being taught and open to understanding and thinking in an innovative way.
Right. More impressionable, less egos stuck in their egos. Yeah.
Or less of thinking, well, this is how it's always been done.
Right.
So why not?
Yeah.
That's not even a question. It's like, just do it. Try it, see if it works.
Right. One thing I love about children is that they don't have the fear that a lot of adults do.
Exactly. Yeah. It's unfortunate that as you get older, you have all these things that hold you back.
Yeah. That's terrific work that you're doing. And so what are some of the takeaways that you'd like to share with the audience, and how can they learn more about the work that you're doing, and how can people get involved?
So restorative justice, now I believe that the term is a little bit more well known. When I first moved back to California, which is I'm originally from, that term was not really well known as what does restorative justice mean. But just in the last month or so, or even a couple of weeks, a more restorative justice based lens has been put on different aspects of society. So I think now the takeaway is that people hopefully are more open to a different way. Not a new way necessarily, but a different way of looking at society. How are we going to bring this next generation in to society that's first here, and how can it be functional? So I think it's an exciting time to be part of something called restorative justice. You can always look up information about it. I would highly suggest looking at where did the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, what did that do, and how is that sort of a foundation of what I learned? And that was the, it's too long to get into, but it was from South Africa. But if you look at a Truth and Reconciliation Committee, that was the foundation that was laid after apartheid. So that a society could be rebuilt and it could be lasting and not, it was grown from the root cause. And to include the perpetrator and the victim.
Right, because you're all parts of society.
And all of society had to be rebuilt. So that's sort of where our philosophy comes from. Information about that, information about the new bill that's passed in California, where a student cannot be suspended from school for willful defiance. A teacher and the community in the school must find a way to keep that student integrated into the school system so that they do not go into the prison system. So those two things I think are really good takeaways for this philosophy. And as far as just as a personal note from business, just keep focused and know that you have a talent, even if things are around you, to not be distracted by that, because it's not always easy. But if there's a goal and there's a purpose in your life, you keep on track because there's a higher meaning to your life.
Yeah, the larger why of exactly the stuff that you're doing, it serves a larger purpose.
A larger purpose, yes.
I know you've personally served as a inspiration for me when I first started out on this journey, and seeing all of the ups and downs that you overcame to be able to get to where you are today.
Yeah, sometimes just life really beats you up. It really does. But the only way to keep going is to know that there's something inside of you, and there's something that you can do hopefully to help society as well.
Thank you so much. That's an amazing message, Angelita. And I'm so privileged to call you my friend. And we look forward to working together, and I'm so excited to have you join our larger global community.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having me here, and from this conversation, this is what we ended up to be able to have today. So,
thank you. Thanks, guys, and we'll see you next episode. Bye.